Alright, YouTube, there are more NSA and Edward Snowden related things coming out in the media from, again, The Guardian over in the UK. It's in Britain now, not the USA only. Of course, there was outcry a while ago because the British finally learned that their own spying programs are actually more extensive than the ones we have here in the USA with the NSA and groups like that conducting surveillance. That caused a little bit of outcry but died down. Now there's more outcry. Here's Things keep piling up layer after layer, each time making more people concerned about the state of the government. Whether it's in the USA, Britain, Germany, wherever it happens to be, it seems to be all encompassing in the whole Western world. To the point where, I mean, it's clear now we're conducting more surveillance on our own population than the Iranians do. And there are some other peripherally related stories within the tech industry right now that are bizarrely echoing places like Iran and North Korea. But anyway, this is about the Guardian. David Miranda, who's the partner of Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald is a journalist who works at the Guardian. He's been the one releasing Snowden's information to the public through the Guardian. His partner, his live-in partner, David Miranda, was actually stopped at the airport and questioned for 9 hours and had his video game consoles, his thumb drives, things like that seized and apparently by the police under some obscure terrorist provision that made no sense. So that was the first hit. Then people were questioning why that was necessary, how it's possibly related to terrorism, especially when he himself is not a journalist. David Miranda is simply the partner of a journalist. That's like saying that if I'm a journalist leaking information, they can stop my wife or whatever, or my child, and question them for hours and hours and confiscate their material, even though they have nothing mainly to do with what I'm doing. The second is that the Guardian's offices were raided by the police, and hard drives and so forth were destroyed, containing the info from Snowden. Now, before people say, "Oh no, now we'll never know the rest of Snowden's leaked information," there are other backups. One is apparently in Brazil, which means the British government can do exactly jack shit about its existence, and that's where they're going to be reporting from now on. So the leaks will continue through the Guardian, just through a different country. Now you have to ask yourself this, because it's becoming more and more clear at this point, both here in the United States and in Europe, in other countries as well, that we're becoming more and more authoritarian. Our governments really aren't listening to the public at this point. It's strange. It seems like they don't care anymore what people believe. You can argue it's been that way for many, many decades, but still, it's more obvious now than it used to be that it's sort of a bye-bye American Pie scenario here, and in Britain, I guess the sun has finally set on their empire. And there are people talking about how this is a symptom of the dying former empire in the comments section, and the link is in the description as usual. You've got to assume this. The British government is not openly authoritarian, any more than the United States government is openly authoritarian. An openly authoritarian country, you expect to see this sort of material. Because in an openly authoritarian society, the government will simply raid some journalists' offices and destroy their material, brand them an enemy of the state, drag them through the streets, and say, "Look how much we're protecting you against this evil traitor to our patriotic cause." You don't see that in a less openly authoritarian society. In a society like the United States or Britain, when something like this happens, the government exposes itself to the public eye doing something which naturally seems bad to the public that the government should be doing in the first place. And it causes outcry, it causes governments to be less popular. Clearly it does. We've seen that with the NSA material. So ask yourself, why would the government be willing to risk that public exposure and ensure that its own approval would go down to destroy info that they had to have known was likely backed up elsewhere anyway? The only answer is that they understand, they either know or they assume, that the rest of the information Snowden leaked to The Guardian is even more concerning and more damning to the governments of the Western world than the material that's already been leaked. It's the only possible explanation as to why they would be willing to do this, because what they had to have assumed is that the high risk of this not being the only copy of this information was a risk worth taking anyway, because it's so damning. WikiLeaks also right now is hosting a file that contains about 350 gigabytes of material. I'll link that too in the description below the Guardian story. Is it related to Snowden? We're not sure. It's been likened on WikiLeaks to basically an insurance policy against prior action. The idea is that if you put the information there encrypted, then you can just have some third party release the encryption key if your whole gig gets shut down because it's important enough that people have to read it. It'll be reported on in the future, but just in case they get taken down in the meantime, they can just release the key. Probably, let's face it, probably does relate to Snowden's material. It may be, in fact, the same material that hasn't been dumped. It could be that WikiLeaks got this particular set of files from the Guardian itself, and this is the contents that they tried to destroy. It's possible that that's the case. What you see with these leaks, you see that the government right now is in full meltdown mode. This is not a small... And I've been saying it since the first NSA leak. I told everyone here, I said there will be more leaks. They will get more concerning. This is hardly the end, and I told people you should take action now because it's going to get worse. And it is. They're attacking journalists now. Now, of course, Michael Hastings was probably killed off for doing similar things investigating the CIA. Of course, if you fuck with the NSA is less likely to car bomb you than to detain you and destroy your hard drives. You fuck with the CIA, you usually end up thrown off a pier somewhere. But you can see the symptoms slowly emerging that our government has been... Everyone knew the government's dishonest, because there's no such thing as an honest government. No one expects there to be a completely honest government anyway. You see now, months later after the first NSA leaks, as time has gone on and more leaks have been revealed, the government has been less and less honest than we thought. It's been more and more pervasively infringing on our rights than we thought. It's been more and more fascist than we thought. It's been more and more ineffective and inept at doing all of these things than even we could have expected out of a government that would actually go through the trouble to do such things, as was made clear with the NSA audit, where it was found, oh, by the way, there are thousands and thousands of errors every year where we accidentally spy on the wrong people, like we spied on people in Washington, D.C. because the area code is similar to that in Egypt. Makes absolutely no sense. And if you believe they're being honest in that audit, you're crazy. All the tinfoilers, the so-called tinfoil conspiracy theorists, they said it's even worse in Britain. They're going to start going after... It's gotten to the point where I actually listen to the tinfoil hat crazies because I find that lately they're right more often than not. They said they're going to go after journalists. And everyone said, well, the NSA is pervasive. Yeah, we'll give you that. Yeah, we think it's bad and it's ineffective. It costs too much. It's kind of infringing the Fourth Amendment. But the government's not going to start going after the press because that would be unconstitutional. And as I've pointed out time and time before, they keep moving the goalposts because most people, they dissociate from these issues. They don't want to, number one, think they're acting crazy. Number two, they don't want to appear crazy. See, the term conspiracy theorist is bandied around mainly by the government to describe anyone that's dissenting. Because that way, the mainstream public will look at these people who are saying supposedly crazy things and say that they're crazy and agree with the government, because that way they can avoid looking crazy. People like to be part of the majority. It's just an innate human trait. They said they're going to go after journalists next, because you have to have a journalist normally to leak this information in any meaningful manner. You can't just simply put it on MediaFire, make a blog post, then get carted off to jail and have it actually spread out to anybody. You know, you put it on YouTube maybe Facebook, it'd get taken down so quickly and accounts deleted so quickly it wouldn't matter. The best thing to do is put it through a journalist, as they've been doing. Everyone said, no, if they went after journalists, then it would be terrible, it would be a huge infringement, I'd be out in the streets, but they're never going to do it. Now it turns out they are doing it. They probably did it with Hastings. They admittedly did it to The Guardian and to Glenn Greenwald and his partner, who is not even a journalist. And people will once again, here's my prediction, move the goalposts and say, oh, they're going after journalists, but it was lawful because they had reason to, because it's not a big issue, because, oh, it's only one journalist, or it's not a mainstream outlet, or it's not mainstream enough. They'll keep moving the goalposts, and they'll do this into infinity. People could start being locked up in padded cells for the crime of speaking out against the government or spreading pamphlets or doing anything else, and there would still be a large number of the population that would completely dissociate from it and say, well, it's okay because these people are crazy. These people are a threat to society. The use of patriotism or support for one's country as an ad hoc relation to actually supporting, to the government, support of the government as an ad hoc relation to support of one's country and patriotism has been used many, many times by fascist regimes, and you see it beginning to be used in the USA and in Britain, and I'm sure other countries as well. Even in the East, these countries we supposedly war against because they violate human rights, and people don't have any rights, and they're put down, and there's surveillance and spying and espionage and all these bad things. The Iranians, the Saudis, the North Koreans, the Russians, wherever else, these countries that we keep having to fight because supposedly they're not free enough and they abuse their people and their neighbors, all of these traits now apply to us. And we can see this with all the NSA leaks. And we can see it now in Britain quite clearly. Now that they're going after journalists, it should be fairly clear to every person in Britain that their government is, number one, completely lying to them, and number two, completely mistreating both them and the press. Which, I don't care if it's Great Britain and they don't have the same law system or the same constitution, the press should remain free to report, including to report on government abuse, because who else is going to keep a government in check? A government is free to abuse its people in any way that it wants unless knowledge, information about that abuse is free to spread around. The advent of the internet for any government wishing to abuse its people has been disastrous for fascism. That's why they continuously endeavor to curtail internet free speech. That's why they continuously attempt to curtail the media now, because the media is all online. The Guardian's website probably gets millions of viewers a day. Of course they want to go after the Guardian. Any press, any media site that goes online and puts leaked documents or summaries of leaked documents or links to leaked documents or expresses admiration for a leaker or a whistleblower is automatically targeted. It's the same in Britain as in the USA. And you can see that clearly now, and watch. Snowden's will continue to leak his material. It will continue to go through the Guardian. Unless Greenwald accidentally, crashes his car while accidentally getting, high off crack or something, which is just as likely as not to happen. Or he just mysteriously vanishes from the face of the earth, along with his partner, coincidentally, and everyone else associated with him, are likely to contain material related to other countries as well, because remember, there's sharing going on between the NSA, the British, the Germans, the Canadians, the Mexicans, India, Russia, China, Japan. All of these countries are interlinked. It'd be interesting to see if Snowden had access to material that linked all of these groups together. And maybe there's links with North Korea. Maybe he's got emails from North Korea expressing admiration for the United States, false flag events or something. We don't know yet. But it's out there and it's going to be leaked, and it's going to be good to see all of this information, unlike WikiLeaks' earlier materials through Manning, which were quickly hushed up by the media. I think there's a glimmer of hope here. That glimmer of hope is this. Once the government starts brazenly attacking journalists, there will always be groups within the media who take notice and fight back, who will become more open about their admiration for Snowden for what he's doing for our freedom. Both our freedom, the freedom of the British, the Germans, and everybody depends on a free, open media that is able to report, including to report things that directly contradict